Hello. In this lesson, we will look at the steps required to include client libraries within your component. After completing this training, you should be able to configure your component to use client libraries. There really is little difference between configuring client libraries in the etc. folder compared to in a component. However, when you add library files to a component, you do so in the apps folder. Now this will work when in author mode and when you're logged in as admin. However, once you move it to your published instance, the user will be accessing the page as an anonymous user and will not have access to that folder, and so your libraries will not load. Fortunately, the client library system in AEM has an embed property that allows you to embed the client libraries from the restricted folder within a folder accessible by an anonymous user. So let's use brackets to add the embed property for a library residing in our apps components directory. In brackets, go to your project and expand the apps directory. We'll go down all the way to company, components, and the font size component. Notice our client libraries folder, and the structure looks correct. I have my pointing files, I have actually my JS files as well as my CSS file, and if I look at the font size.js, I can see that this library has a dependency on jQuery. So normally when a library has a dependency, I would add a dependency property to the library folder and set that value to the category it is dependent upon. However, I know that in our head HTML there is already a call to include the jQuery library, so I won't bother to add it here. Instead, I'm just going to go to the client libs folder node settings and make sure that the primary type is client library folder, which it is, and I'm going to copy the categories into my clipboard. So now what I'll do is go to the etc. folder, which is accessible by an anonymous user, work my way down to the client libs, company, and the default libs folder, and look at the content.xml there. I can see this is a library I added earlier, so now what I'm going to do is just add an additional property called embed, and make it equal to the client library in my apps folder. So I'll just do file, save all. And that's really all there is to it. Okay, so our library is now all set to use. However, we need to complete two tasks to be able to test whether the libraries will work or not. We need to add an HTML file and some tags to complete the component. And we also need to add the font size component to our page component so that when we render the page, we can confirm that our libraries are loaded. So back in brackets, we'll go to our apps, font size component, right click, say new file, call it font size.html. And add the following tags to it. Now let's go to our page component into the content page.html and add some sightly tags that will actually reference our component. All right, that should be it. So let's just select file, save all. And now we'll go back into our browser and test. Now to test to ensure our libraries are invoked, let's log back into AEM. Currently by default when I log in, I do so to the TouchUI settings. However, I'm working on a laptop and so I'm going to take advantage of this moment and change my settings so that I'm working in the classic UI by default. To do that, I'll just go to this icon up here, select the gear for user preference, and change my authoring mode from touch optimized default to classic and click accept. Okay, so let's actually go into our page and select open. Notice I'm logging in as the default for classic UI. My main library has loaded and I can see that my buttons have been included, and if I click on them, my JavaScript is working. So my embedded libraries have also loaded. If the font size component does not appear correctly, it's probably because your browser has cached an earlier version of the page. So to reload the page and actually clear the cache, in Windows you can hit Control F5, or on a Mac you could actually just click Apple plus R or Command plus R. In Linux it would be F5. So I now see that my libraries and my components have loaded. One last thing to do. Since I know that all my libraries are loading, I'm going to comment out that alert message so it does not appear every time I render the page. So back in brackets, let's comment out that alert message. So I will go to the etc. folder, to my default libs, scripts, company main.js, and I'll just comment that out and click File, Save All. So that's it. This lesson is now complete. You should now be able to configure your component to use client libraries. Thank you for watching.